Right, moving on, Ales Bialiatski, the 63-year-old Belarusian descendant and Nobel Peace Prize laureate, has vowed to keep resisting the regime from exile just hours after being freed from years of imprisonment. In an exclusive interview with media agency AFP, Bialiatski, who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize back in 2022 for his lifelong work documenting human rights abuses in Belarus, shared that while his freedom is a cause for relief, his heart remains with those who are still imprisoned in Belarus.
I went through all the difficulties that Belarusian political prisoners went rogueth. Isolation cells and prisons inside prisons and constant humiliation and inhumane, but the prize saved me from much worse unpleasantries that my other colleagues went through.
Meanwhile, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, who has been in power since 1994, has long considered Bialiatski as a personal enemy. For nearly 3 years, Bialiatski's family and the world barely had any proof of life, as he was kept at prison colony in Gorky near the Russian border. According to his rights group Vyasna, there are currently over 1,100 political prisoners in Belarus. Bialiatski also warned that while the regime has carried out some prisoner releases, it continues to arrest more individuals. The recent release of these political prisoners, remember, comes as part of a deal with Washington that lifted U.S. sanctions on Belarus's vital fertilizer exports in exchange for the release of the opposition figures. Bialiatski called on the European Union to enter negotiations with Minsk, encouraging more efforts to secure the release of other political prisoners. 4 prominent Belarusian opposition figures held a press conference in Ukraine's Chernihiv region after their release. Among them were Maria Kolesnikova and Viktor Babarika.
We know that complex processes are currently underway, and I would like to thank Donald Trump and his team for what is happening now, for the fact that the situation has moved off dead center, and that there is hope for positive changes. I thank Alexander Lukashenko for making it possible to free people, our release, and I will welcome any further steps in this direction.
This release really affected, well, not necessarily media figures, but well-known individuals. We must not forget those whose names we have never heard. It would be a great betrayal on our part, and especially on the part of those who were actually involved, if we forget that there are still thousands of people there today. We will only be able to sleep peacefully, and I personally will only be able to sleep peacefully not after my son is free, but after there's no one left there.
Babarika, who's a banker and philanthropist, had been a strong contender in the 2020 presidential elections before he was arrested and sentenced to 14 years in prison on politically motivated corruption charges. Despite his imprisonment, Babarika said that he had no regrets about his political activism. Kolesnikova, another key opposition leader, was sentenced to 11 years in prison for her role in organizing mass protests against Lukashenko's regime in 2020. As Belarus remains a key ally of Russia, the country continues to face international sanctions over its crackdown on dissent and its support for Russia's invasion of Ukraine.